Thank you, Nikhil.
Thank you, Ranga, for bringing us up to speed on the technical aspect of the Ballast Water Management Convention. Can you put mine, please? I'd like to I'd like to read one sentence of, just one sentence. No, I will read just one sentence of what I came across recently. Disillusion is besetting the charter market as most size segments are affected by the current slump in demand, while oversupply is becoming a chronic ailment. Now, bearing in mind the prevailing ambience, both with what Mr. Ranganathan said and what I just read out, we now invite you all to ask questions to our esteemed panel. Before we just go on to that, for the sake of good order, please raise your hand. Good order, as well as the video which is being shot. Please raise your hand, identify yourself, and identify which panelist you would prefer he answers your question. So, the floor is all yours, gentlemen. The first one comes from Sohail.
My question is to anybody in the panel. All this presentation is very excellent. We have seen for many months going on with the water blast management. How this started actually, do we have any percentage of people suffering for this? Any seafarer or in the dry dock? I've never heard anything about this. And we have been working on the ships for so many years, going in the blast tank. No seafarer has reported that he has got any problem with the microorganisms of the ballast water management. So, how this thing came, maybe the companies are making money, want to just introduce this water blast management to spend all monies for the shipping owners, Anyone can reply this, please?
Yeah, so maybe I can answer that. The whole discussion really started back when the zebra mussels were introduced to the Great Lakes, which caused clogging to power stations. It was almost a nuclear power plant breakdown due to this. So that's basically when the discussion started. Totally, the estimate of the cost to fisheries, to extra cleaning of power station filters and these things is estimated to $7 billion a year. So that is just a cost estimate. But in addition to that, of course, you see that certain organisms are being introduced to areas where they're not supposed to be, which is also creating disturbance to ecosystems. So there is a validity to the convention. Of course, it's coming. Well, it's not introduced yet, but it's coming late. So the question is, can you really turn back this development? And that I think is a very valid question.
I appreciate what you just said, but there are two aspects to my question here. The first one is, we have been talking about ballast water management, and you specified a figure of $7 billion a year. What would be the total cost to the shipping industry for putting ballast systems on all the ships, and then the annual cost of maintaining those systems, compared to the $7 billion per year for one country? The part B of this question is, at what point did the shipping industry take the onus of accepting this cost on themselves? Why wasn't it on the ports, or why wasn't it on the governments to implement clean ballast or reception facilities to receive the ballast which they presumably said was harmful to their environment? Part 3, I'll just add just one more because it came up, was I remembered recently when somebody mentioned there are crabs in Amsterdam which were not a part of that environment. But those particular crabs, when imported from China, cost 50, 60 euros a kilo. Why don't we adapt and utilize those species and commercialize it and re-export it back to other countries or consume it in our own restaurants rather than complaining about those species? ABC, anybody, please.
Hello? Okay, so that works. My turn now. Total cost, I've heard something like 60 billion talked about, but that's overall across the industry, 60,000 ships. You ask about why the onus hasn't been put on terminals, on ports, that sort of thing. That was a discussion in IMO 15 years ago, and at that time the decision was made totally that ships would be responsible. It wasn't possible to do it in the terminals to achieve a consistent means to discharge ballast, that sort of thing. That was a discussion that was had in the industry, and the decision was made to put it onto ships. In terms of why, just overall, I've just spent the last 6 years in Australia dealing with FPSOs, disconnectable FPSOs, so the ships. And it's interesting, up in northwest Australia, where there's probably the biggest growth industry in terms of shipping tonnage, well, until the last couple of years, in terms of iron ore, fertilizer, LNG, that sort of thing. They now have an outbreak of crown of thorns starfish in that area. Northwest Australia has actually got away without any, without too much effect from invasive marine species, but now they have this outbreak of crown of thorns, Ningaloo Reef, World Maritime Park, that sort of thing. How much of it's from ballast water, how much of it's from anti-foul, hull fouling is a moot point. I mean, Australia, again, as an example, has had ballast water exchange since 1991 and introduced a risk-based approach to anti-foul, I think about 5 years ago now. So they were certainly slower in picking up on the anti-foul element, but they're pretty strong on both counts now, yet are still seeing invasive marine species. Does it impact you and me personally as a ship owner, as a guy sailing on a ship or a guy who used to sail? No. But environmentally, unfortunately, it is. And I do sympathise with all the ship owners out here. There is no win for you. It costs to install, it costs to buy, it costs to maintain, and it costs to operate. There is no win on this one. It's just overall, from an environmental perspective, the costs here. The Amazon, I think the upper reaches of the Amazon have mussels, the planned maintenance there on sluice valves and hydroelectric plants, you know, which have shown that it's just potentially smaller and smaller ships moving further and further up the Amazon have just carried these invasive marine species with them and have now had that impact. I've attended a number of ballast water conferences, and I'm sorry, just to go on recently, and it's interesting that there's been quite a big challenge that if 15 years ago everyone had said, let's just install filters, filter out, you know, the 50 micron ballast water, potentially 95% of the problem would have gone away. Instead, we're still fighting and discussing over dead is dead or not for UV technologies, what works, how do we sample, how do we test. We could actually put a pragmatic solution in and dealt with 95% of the problem 15 years ago, but instead it's still drifting, drifting, drifting. And how much impact there has been, as I say, crown of thorns starfish into northwest Australia. That's something current as a result of the lack of action on this front.
Yeah, I already have the mic. This question is...
Good evening. My name is, I'm Captain Vijay. Anybody else? Sorry.
Okay.
I'm Captain Vijay. I'm a marine surveyor and consultant. My question is to Mr. Agia. This is taking into consideration once the system is completely implemented on board, and taking into consideration owners have spent the money. Will we come to a point where treated ballast water samples are sent from every port to lab for analysis, similarly what we do for bunker samples?
Well, I think, can you hear me? Yeah, I think that very well could happen. I think it will probably take some time before port state controls around the world kind of align on how to handle this. But I think it's quite obvious that if this convention, when once implemented and once gone into force, is going to be effective, there will need to be some sort of testing regime implemented. I think probably there will be certain states and countries that take a lead on this, and it will probably take quite a few years before you see this throughout the world. But I don't think it's unlikely scenario.
Yeah, this is, excuse me. What's going on? Sheil Cabral here. Well, I'm just quoting a few things what Ranganathan presented. He mentioned that type approvals are given on scaled down versions. And when it comes to higher capacity plants, the D2 standards are in non-compliance. Further, he states somewhere down that in case when we have this ballast water sediment management plan and the samples tested are in non-conformance or non-compliance, there will be detention of the vessel or stuff, if I'm not wrong. So what we see here is there is quite a disjoint in the manufacturer or the planner or the class and the installer. You know. So how do we handle this situation here?
There is no answer to it. You have to understand what we have here. We've got an ill thought out piece of legislation which is making people take in equipment and buy it before it's been tested and approved, put on ships, it's obsolete before it even starts to sail, and then we take it into ports where port state control in corrupt countries are going to arrest our vessels. That's what we have. We spent 10 years talking about it but not solving the actual problem, which is the legislation. It's not waiting for the extra country to ratify it. The actual problem is the legislation's rubbish, and it should have been sorted out a long time ago.
Just to add what Captain Stockley said, the discussion in the IMO, and I think it was the 66th session of the MEPC, was that for ship owners who have been proactive and gone ahead and installed ahead of ratification, even though the G8 guidelines are expected to be rewritten, they should not be penalized. But that is okay for us to say in the IMO and all agree about, but you know, individual countries might have a different approach, so we cannot rule out, you know, vessels being detained, even though they have done everything supposedly by the book and ahead of ratification.
And that's an important point, that, you know. For example, in Oman Shipping Company, we've put in over, I don't know, $10, $12 million worth of these oil water ballast systems. None of them work. In fact, on 10 ships, the supplier has said, don't worry, we've upgraded this to a Mark II. But of course, the Mark I that you have, which has never worked, never been used, will never be approved by the US Coast Guard. So buy a Mark II, please. You know? Absolutely garbage, isn't it? I mean, if it wasn't serious, we'd all be making comedy shows about this. The situation is, none of this equipment should have been sold to us before it was tested and proved. You know, how many companies have we bought stuff from have actually gone bankrupt now? Aren't even here. You know, I think that, and the companies who have come around selling this to us should be ashamed of themselves, totally ashamed.
Yeah, thank you, David. I really, Mr. Jamil, and that with this one. My question, I mean, I'm living in Toronto for 20 years. As Greg said, I agree with him. Lakers, close fishers, coast guards yes, they can be concerned about this, all the environmental API and US Coast Guard. But why, we are the ship owners, I'm the general manager for Sai Marine, we have the ownership of the vessel for 70 ships. My questions to panel, and of course, QTC, Mr. Jamil really is a good senior on that, he will go, why we are scared of IMO? Why, as a owner, why the classification, with due respect with the class, those who are sitting here, why we as a owner don't have the say to IMO, okay, this is not right. You are selling the product which is not going to be, because it's costing money, and number one, and number two, that why we are imposing the whole, all over the world. What about this oil bilge facilities? For sure, it still is going on, right? Why can't they adopt that thing? You know, why the 55,000 vessels, you know, and the 1,200 average is coming, the new building, right, is penalized for that, just for the sake of US, sorry to say, and the European Union? This is not a good thing on that too. Why, where somebody has to represent, why the class flag has to go on that? Why the owners are penalizing on that one? Which is like a SICA zone. Just I'm giving example for the low sulfur fuel. When the ship goes, yes, there is a regulation, you can change all the thing, you follow the SICA zone regulation. So why the ships who are trading in the Gulf area will go to US or somewhere, why they are penalizing to put the 1 million, this beast on their ship, where the and the scary thing, IMO, they put this thing, if convention come into force, right, I don't know when, God knows, then they are putting in IOPP certificate, which is ridiculous. Sorry to say, to use the word. Why? So that means the old ships, they will park. After the implementation and after the first dry docking, which will be, they are putting in IOPP certificate, which is unacceptable. So we have to raise our voice, sorry to say, as the ownership, they do something. Big companies, with due respect, they can average, who's their 100 ship. Those who can't afford 1 million, after the, let's say, tomorrow 2.5% countries sign, and that's it. So that is the very gray area, you know. Thank you.
I think the answer to your question is simple. The reason why we should fear IMO is because they're deaf, dumb, and stupid. You know, they're not going to listen to us. The second reason why we should fear IMO is because there's thousands of shipping companies running different ships with different agendas. So as a body, we're not aligned. And to say, have we been discussing it? God, I wish I had $1 for every time I've been to one of these conferences. You know, I've been on. I was on the Greek committee of IMO there, where we went there. We had meetings and everything, and people far cleverer than me, all you technical guys, over and over again said this is garbage. But it's still here. It's here because the legislation's here, and the legislation's the problem. That's the fundamental problem here. When we talk about these microorganisms, you know, I don't know whether these environmentalists are right or wrong. But what I do know was that I was running around on super tankers, discharging dirty ballast and all sorts of things for the last 30 years, and nobody was saying that was causing growths and things. You know, and I do know, for example, that species turn up in different parts of the world which have got nothing to do with ships. You know, we've got grey squirrels in England we're trying to get rid of. So you know, I just think that as a group we're not united. We never will be. We can't even get Intertanko and BIMCO to discuss things properly. So the chances of your company and my company, which have got completely different ideas, you know. But you see, the problem is not whether the real problem, the real crux of the matter, is not whether we're against the environmentalists or whatever. That's not the case. If I could buy this piece of machinery and put it on my ship and run my ships, I would put it into my costing and we'd move forward. We wouldn't mind it. But that's not the case. No, it's not the case. None of us can buy the right equipment. They don't even know what they want. You know, this is a real problem. So we have the likes of our companies that can afford to put this stuff on. We're proactive, but in actual fact, we've been doing ourselves a disservice. You know, I personally wasn't involved in buying the machines, but we've wasted $12 million. And for a small ship owner, the people I used to work for, that $12 million could kill them, totally kill them. And I don't know what the answer is. Well, I do know what the answer is. The answer is to re-look at the legislation.
Thank you. That is, David, I really agree with you. This still is the time, because this IMO, it is still not in force. We are waiting for 2.5% to be signed the countries, and then they will bingo. They will put the IMO regulation, and they will park the ship as per including IPP certificate, right? So what am I saying here? As all the owners, ship owners are sitting here, still there is a time to wake up call and to bang the IMO. Okay, hey guys, you can't put as a policeman to enforce to all the world, okay, park your ship. That is they are doing, sorry to say. And that will happen. So this will be the time. That's
you need to understand, it's not us. All our countries, like Oman, for example, and various other countries have all ratified it. We should have stopped them ratifying it.
That's why I'm saying.
That's the mistake.
That's why I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. And we didn't stop them, and now you've got a problem, because the way IMO works, once you ratify it, you've ratified it.
No,
you can't take it away. We can't go back to our countries. I can't go back to Oman and say, listen, you got it wrong. You need to go back to IMO and reverse it, because they don't allow you to. You can't do that.
Thank you. That was what David might think, to approach to us from, it will come to us from there, to stop it on that.
Listen, the only countries that are standing against this are ones that have got strong ship owners fighting for it, the likes of the Greeks, you know? And I really hope they don't capitulate, because what's happening is the environmentalists in our own countries, our own flags, have all ratified something, but they haven't looked at how it affects the actual business at all.
No, with due respect, environmental is something else, David, and I can share the recent thing. We visited one ship, is brand new from shipyard. We were interested in that. I have the picture, and this I'm just giving you all panels here. I visited the ship in the US, right? And it is MR tankers, and they have got, yes, we have the water blast management in Q88, all the thing. When I visited that, it's a big hall with the written water blast management. I was really impressed. I'm like, oh, we are getting with all, including 1 million safe. Of course, when I entered in that big hall, guess what? In one side, there was a table tennis table was there with a ping pong ball, and other side, the basketball net was there. They were playing this game. There was nothing, water blast management equipment was there. So this is the thing, what we are getting nowadays, the awareness. So I don't know. I mean, this is the really scary. This is scary, and wake up call for all. Thank you very much.